Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 17th day of the New Earth Summit, now in its third year, India's first integrative summit on solutions to our problems in health, food, farming, and environment. I'm Sophie Sequeira from Earthkeepers Goa, your host for this evening. And I extend a warm welcome to our esteemed panelists and to our audience on behalf of our summit convener, Darryl D'Souza, and our 10 Earthkeeper groups in India and overseas. We express our gratitude to you for taking time out to be with us today and to share your insights and experience so that all watching this live webinar and its recording later the holistic science and wisdom being presented on this platform that will help us all co-create a beautiful world. So our topic for today is food supply chain contamination. I will start with introducing our panelists to the audience. Rahul Goswami is a former advisor to the Center for Environment Education in Himalaya under the Ministry of Environment. He is also a former advisor to the Ministry of Agriculture, Central Government Program on Traditional Cultivation Knowledge. For the last 30 years, he's been documenting traditional knowledge systems in India and adjacent parts of Asia, and in doing so, developed a keen interest in rural crafts, artisans, and hand weaves. For the last 12 years, Rahul has been a UNESCO expert on intangible cultural heritage in Asia. Our second panelist is Darryl D'Souza, who has been teaching people how to reverse chronic illnesses with integrated natural therapies for over 16 years. After his own suffering of 14 years due to chronic illness that almost ended his life in 2004 due to modern medicine failing him. His book, Become Healthy or Extinct, and his lectures, seminars, webinars, and workshops on the healing of mind, body, and spirit are highly sought out. Darryl was the secretary of the World United Doctors and Healers Association for 5 years, during which he curated and convened their annual continued medico-spiritual education conferences. Darryl is also an industrial engineer, organic farmer, environmentalist, TEDx speaker, founder of Earthkeepers Connect, ambassador of Vegan Nation, convener of the New Earth Summit, and a speaker at the World Parliaments on Spirituality. So for the first hour of this webinar, I have a couple of questions for our panelists, which will be followed by question and answers with our audience at 7 p.m., who can type in their questions in the Q&A box below even before that time. If you would like to receive the recorded video of this webinar, or you want to share it with others, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The New Earth Summit. Now for my questions to the panelists. Darryl, where does contamination of our food supply chain begin, and how can we clean it up for healthier food supply?
Yes, thank you, Sophie, and good evening, Rahul. Lovely to have you on the panel today. I would like to share my views through some pictures which I have in a presentation, and that will be my narration into our journey from where we were to where we are today, and hopefully how we can come out of it. So we need a little bit of history and background to start with, and this is a picture that I've shown before in a previous webinar in the summit. I'm talking about the indigenous people, or the people who were local to the land in every country. And as you can see, their habitats on the right hand side, always next to water bodies, whether the water was in front of them or in the ground, accessible, because forest or catchment area was there close by. Now, they had self-sufficient ecosystems, And the second point I want to add is living ecosystems that taught them a lot. And they always had their food supply locally. They never had to go far away from their community to procure food. So when such communities anchored themselves in the homes that you can see, they had already mastered the art of farming so that they could grow their own food. And to some extent that they lacked, then maybe they would go for animals. Now, as we have progressed and come more into the modern world, this is what we have evolved into in the villages first. And this is a very peculiar snap from above of just one piece of land, but you can see a road in between. And on the left side of the road, it's one very green scenario with spaces between houses and a lot of trees in between. Maybe they could grow some, vegetables or have a garden. And on the right hand side, you can see a very congested environment. Now, obviously, for different reasons, maybe the land on the right hand side, somehow the landowner may have wanted to make more money. And obviously, he would not be living there in that congestion. Uh, so he kept on selling that land, and there's a population density that has come, and the spaces between homes has got lesser and lesser. And this is a local vegetable and fruit market. It happens in places where, these are daily markets. They happen in places where food is grown locally. You don't see a big, structure or big government created uh, kind of shopping area. These are just local farmers who have harvested their crops from somewhere close by locally, and they're selling it on the roadside. So the point about this is when you have space and you have greenery and you can do local farming, then you can have local daily produce, fresh produce. But when you come to a place like this, which seems to be the so-called very advanced and modern and high-tech cities, you obviously can see that there is hardly any green space and nobody is growing food over here. So it is plain and simple to understand. You are not going to get daily fresh food whenever you choose to step out. You will have to go to certain shops and malls where you are going to get different kind of food. So what happens is, who caters to this food, to these people's food? Far off places, farmlands that are in a different zone. So who has designed this? We'll come to this a little later. Who has designed this kind of a system where the farmlands are, at a different part of the country, and your staying zone is so congested in certain parts. And it is from this that our food supply chain, the whole topic comes in, where so much of science and logistics goes into it. So you have the starting where there is green land and you're growing vegetables, and then there's animal husbandry, and the basics are grown over there. Then from there, there are centers that take them in bulk. There are processing units. From processing units, there are storehouses somewhere in the states. Especially in India, states are, I mean, resources and states are divided into regions, that this state grows this crop, that state grows this crop. Very obvious to see that we have created a problem of more transportation miles for something that could have grown in our neighborhood. and which is currently growing in some few places. So then after these go downs, then you have they come to your city stores, to the retail stores, and then that's where we go and shop for all our food. So this now, because this route is so long, fresh food is not going to last in this. So you have to find ways of preserving food, and that's how we have landed with this picture on the right, where most people who are living in those cities, that city of Chicago that I showed you, the normal option for them food is a supermarket or a mall, where all of these packaged food products are there, as compared to somebody living close to a farm or in a village, where you get daily fresh and whole foods. Now, whole foods are something they are the actual real form of food made by God or the environment or nature, whatever you call. And all other species on this planet are eating whole foods the way God made them. But we are the only ones who are cutting, chopping, scraping, squeezing, juicing, and creating imbalanced units of nutrition. And this right hand side in the mall is full of such kind of, I mean, you can't even call it food. You will call it food extracts or what we call processed and packaged foods. Now, the first thing that they do is a lot of damage to the human body. They are unnatural foods. They have got a lot of artificial ingredients within them. And if you see the word stabilizer on a tin, then you have to understand whatever the chemical name, you have to understand that it is a chemical put in there to cut down the cross reactions between the preservative and other either synthetic taste enhancers or coloring agent or flavoring agent. So there's literally atomic warfare going on in these tins or tetra packs or plastic bottles or glass bottles, and stabilizers are put in there to keep it stable. And so what do? We bring these artificial units of food into our homes, open them up, and then we put that food into our body, and the atomic warfare continues within our body. And that which on the right of the cell is the effect of free radicals. That means these chemicals, they lack electrons, they rob electrons right from your lining of your mouth, your throat, through your stomach, your intestines, your colon, and the toxic chemicals get once in the blood, they're absorbed into your bloodstream, go to the liver, kidneys, and create a lot of sickness. So the first thing that is we should be smart enough to see that these are really not healthy food formats for us, and stop using them. But people in the city will say that, well, there's very less fresh food. Of course, nowadays, because such foods are getting such a bad name and people are understanding that organic is good, so you are seeing the supermarkets and the malls bringing up sections on fresh food. Many times it's not organic. So they know about it, that now shops and stores will just do what sells. They are not there to take care of your health. They do not advise you what to pick up and what not to pick up. It is we who have to tell them what to stock. So please don't go with this notion that you have to eat what is there in the mall. Second thing is all these package products, their packing materials, they are made from paper, which is coming from cutting down of trees. All the plastic is made from crude oil, which is causing holes in the earth and the oceans. All the metal is coming from mining, making holes into the earth. All the glass is coming from sand, which is they're excavating our seashores and our riverbeds. So there's a double damage, not only damage to the human body, but also damage to Mother Earth. And this is what we presented yesterday in the threefold path of ahimsa, which means ahimsa means non-violence. So this is what we're doing on a daily basis by eating all of these chemicalized products. We are putting an assault on our own body. So it's violence to the human body. And the second part is violence to Mother Earth. And finally, all of the manufacturing companies that make these products, they are pumping out effluents into the water, contaminating our water. They are putting contaminants into the air. And the amount of heat that is generated in all of these factories and their machines are also ending up making the earth a hotter place to live. Now, all of this health damage and damage to the earth is only happening because we are choosing. That's right, you have a choice every morning, right from the morning to the night, of not contributing to this damage uh, across the planet. Now, the picture on the left hand side is uh, all the transportation of these packaged foods, right? All of these trucks, all of the fuel, all of the trucks. Of course, you have to mine the metal from the earth. All the petroleum will go into the tires and the plastic and the resin and all of that. So, still more. So this entire, there's so much of transport and packing just going into this faulty format of food, which is killing us on a daily basis. And on the right hand side is another product of this type of structure or smart cities, where we have made staying zones at one place and then our food production at another, so you do not get food production jobs in your city. And then you will get so many other kind of jobs. You have to travel for half an hour or 1 hour, again putting a tremendous requirement for transportation facilities, for cars, for trains, for buses, and having to spend most of your time, in a day, at least 1 hour, often in the morning and evening, in all of these locomotives and transport devices. So now none of that exists in a place like this if it is designed well. Now, I have not drawn this diagram, and for my design also, certain places are a little bit congested, but at least in this, you can see that there is food production close by. There seems to be an entertainment center, there seems to be a research center, some places on the outskirts, you can see some homes. So, in a place where these things are in close proximity, you're not going to have all of those earlier problems. You're going to get daily fresh food. And if you're building materials and you need lesser transport as well. And the model that I presented recently was a model where we can prosper and not damage our health and the earth at least for the next 2,500 years. And so that is the stark difference if you compare to the current model that we are living in of the cities, concrete jungles that I call the graveyards of humanity, which don't even have a lifespan of 25 years. So, coming to how this thing came about. So, as the Industrial Revolution started, before that, I mean, they were started by businessmen. And the peculiar thing about these businessmen were they used to travel and they could see in different places that people were making products and goods and services, and they could see that they were self-sufficient. And these businessmen didn't want to dirty their hands making working with the soil, making food, doing all of the hard labor. So they said, we'll do the easy job. It's just that we will become traders and transport goods from one place to the other. And in that design, that was the root cause of the design, where they started separating uh, living structures from food structures, from education places. All those distances started increasing because these people thought that we will only be able to make money if there is a distance and there is no self-sufficiency in a certain area. And that's how. And of course, the carrot was at that time that you are going to get some goods and some artifacts from a different country. But really, did people ever need that? People were already self-sufficient in their places. So anyway, people fell for that, carrot, and so they had to make all of these machines, all the transport devices, whether it is the motorbike or the car, and then the trains and the planes and all of that. And that's when also this currency system started coming in. And before this, what was happening in the local villages? They were just working on bartering things and just giving each other credit or some kind of very soft exchange system. But when things started being transferred over long distances, then and from different places, then you could not do barter. So this entire money system came in, which was first backed, had to be backed by some real value, which was gold. And so in lieu of gold, they printed paper money. And over the few decades now, the amount of paper money is in excess of what real gold is there. So everybody's understanding that we have a fake money system, which is called the fiat currency. And unfortunately, all of these ideas, they started putting in the university that this is the meaning of development. We need to create more jobs. We need to create more products. We need to create more services. There are opportunities in this place and that place because there is lack over here and lack over there. Now we have to remember earlier there was no lack in any case. So you can call it some people just wanted to become innovative and try to make money out of the system without doing some real on the ground work themselves or without just sticking to where they were, in which country or which village they were, and try to make that holistic and prosperous. When somebody tries to go beyond that and beyond their own community or beyond their own state, then obviously it points to a need or a greed for more money, more control, more resources, more power. Anyway, that's what has happened over the decades with us. And where we used to have the capacity and land around our homes, which I fortunately still have in Goa. That's why I ran away from Mumbai in 2010 because there was no mud anywhere as far as I could walk. So I couldn't, grow my own food. And we know that food is medicine. I mean, if you grow healthy, natural, organic food, then you're not going to fall sick in the first place and you're eating fresh food. You're not going to get sick because of food. And then we also lost our capacity of growing herbs around our place and natural medicine. So this is the same. The output on the right hand side is a result of the same model. When you did not have access to making your own herbs or making food your medicine, and you opted for these shops and these malls, which are all artificial food, that's how we became sick. And then the advantage was taken, and this whole medicine system also in the control of these businessmen or capitalists has gone on for the last 120 years. And it is the biggest, industry in the world and being called the big pharma mafia for the way they deceived us and took away natural medicine from us and started making certain other kinds of medicines that only they could formulate in their labs. So what's happening here? There's a flow of money that's going away from the local community to these business. Now, another resultant is what I presented on the webinar about food, where we have resulted in people staying all over the globe. For example, uh, food is made only by plants. Animals do not make food; they eat plants. That's their food. So the most amount of plants are growing on the equator and on between these latitudes, whether it's 30 degrees or 35 degrees. And as you go higher up north and south, the amount of plants that grow are lesser because you have lesser amount of sun. Maybe you have sun for 1 month or 2 months. So as people dispersed around the place, the same thing happened that people along the equator had to create more of the food. And like India is the biggest beef exporter in the world. So we are feeding all of the cows on the grass and the leaves growing in the sun over here. And that meat we are shipping to the countries where there is, uh, not much of sun. Obviously, in those places, people, because there is very less vegetation, they cannot be vegetarian. So they get into the idea or they begin to believe that they were born or it's in their genes to eat meat. But no, whether you're a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian is not in your genes and not even in your history. It is depending on your location on the planet. So this very thing caused more transport of even vegetables. Now people in cold countries who have realized over the last few decades that, oh gosh, I should not be eating, 80% of meat. I should bring it down to 70% or 60 or 50 or 40 or 30%. They have been calling for more fruits and vegetables. So if they are not growing much in the cold countries, then these have to be shipped from all of these places where all of these fruits and vegetables are growing. So again, you have this model operating where people and cities and civilizations have been created, which cause a tremendous amount of transport of food, manufacturing food in one place and giving it to another place. If it was, plant-based food, and then when you are transporting meat, it takes about 8 times more amount of land and water to produce that same amount of meat that would feed a non-vegetarian as compared to if that person was vegetarian. So this for me is one of the biggest things that is damaging the planet. And if we want a future of anywhere above 500 years, this has to change. So, well, there's a lot of land still there, habitable land across the equator, and people can relocate um, and have, bring all of this burden on the earth down. So these two aspects, the transport of food and people traveling for work, is causing so much of the extraction and use of non-renewable resources. And obviously, that does not happen here when you try to make your state self-sufficient. So we spoke on this topic 2 or 3 days back, where the model that I promote is the current green spaces that are there in our villages. Let us start designing them as holistic living hubs and only ground floor, living, because there are a lot of health aspects when you live on the ground floor. You walk bare feet, you get time to just move out of the house and have sun, and you have natural groundwater or well water. So those are all aspects of health. But the current green spaces, let us start putting these ideas into people, and also the people living in the cities. Obviously the structures that they are living in, they will get used up, or they will be up for demolition at certain point of time. They should not make the mistake of getting into another structure like that in the city, but they should come to opt for getting into rural places or the countryside. Now, this word over there, eco village economy. So, in this place, products, goods, services are created by the people for the people. And so, money circulates in this system. If there are certain people who do not have finances, then just one person from the community who has more finances, they could invest to build up certain, whether it is an education center or it is creating certain infrastructures, whether it is home building, products for home building or products for, uh, making clothes or whatever. So the important part is that you need to have money circulating within this local economy. And perhaps your food will just be a 10 minutes walk or 15 minutes walk away. And if you design your community to be self-sufficient in all aspects, okay, that means you will get all kinds of jobs in this locality. So we have proposed a cycling culture or a tricycle with gears, that kind of structure, um, where just across 5 kilometers by 5 kilometers, which is 25 square kilometers, which is about 6,177 acres. So every place to be self-sufficient. So there's no carbon, there's transport miles on food and for work. So you can build a very low destructive model to the planet by having this kind of living structure and with all natural building materials. And this is the kind of model that I'm saying will go for the next 2,500 years. The key point is that not extracting anything from the earth that is not renewable. And yes, all of these structures that come up on the earth, they only come up at the cost of holes inside the earth. So we have to remember that all the metal that has come out over here is coming from holes in the earth. And the beauty of having a ground floor structure in the village is that you do not need any metal, you do not need any concrete. You can do it with the local stones, local mud, local lime, and local wood. Now, wood is also a renewable resource. If you have land, it cannot be a renewable resource in this place. If you have enough land, you can grow more and more trees. And that's the amazing topic that we are going to present tomorrow. It's really amazing and insightful. It's about the tree economy, and it's related to this. So if you are in the village, you can have trees as a renewable resource, and you do not have to make all these holes inside the earth. Isn't it beautiful that you just sow a seed and Mother Earth brings up a resource for you? You do not have to dig as deep as these buildings are to make holes in the earth and destroy this planet. So this is how we can live in a very holistic life with a lot of space for food, for recreation, healthy structures, a lot of arts and culture. And the more you live in nature, the more you learn real life sciences. And if we do that, we will start getting back to what is natural food, what is whole food. And the key is to have the freedom to have a very short supply chain in food that is managed by us, by trusted people who will not contaminate the soil and not contaminate, the plants, and bring food to us, from farm to the table in just an hour or so. I mean, that's the kind of life I live here today. When we want some vegetables, I grow about 25 fruits and vegetables. So whenever anything is needed in the kitchen, it's just 15 minutes. I just take it out of the ground and it's on the kitchen table. So that's how energy and food should flow. Well, people now are complaining that yes, everybody cannot grow food, But if you live to a village space, you will see that your friends and your neighbors, you get food from them. Otherwise, in the city markets, because of the transportation costs and because there's, the scarcity, organic food is much, maybe 25% or 30%, or some people say it's 50% more expensive. But if you do a calculation for 6 months or 1 year, you will see that you will pay lesser medical bills if you are on natural and organic food and fresh food. So these are the things that will save us. I've been doing the Earth Keepers Market in Goa since 2015, and it's not just about fresh organic food. It's also about natural body products, natural home cleaners, and every product in your house that can be natural for your home and for your body as well. And having community centers like this, this was my wellness center in Kalangut, where it's not only an organic market, but also a place where we do wellness activities, we treat patients, and there is lots of arts, culture, movies, and food festivals. This is all possible in a village scenario, or where you have more land. So finally, reflecting on this last slide, people have understood this in the world today about capitalists and all what they have done to create this very damaged world that is mostly based on the control of money, products, services, and from that comes power. And you would hear of many organizations now coming into the limelight for various reasons, especially the pandemic and the environmental disasters across this globe, like even the Rockefeller Foundation, with regards to this entire allopathic medicine industry that has created all the comorbid people on this planet. That is, people basically living on medicines to suppress their symptoms and having their immune systems damaged. And other names such as the Rothschild banking system, which were the people who funded all of these big organizations. You'll hear Bilderberg Group and their holding companies such as BlackRock, and those are those companies that are owning the biggest FMCG companies across the globe, and also the big pharma. And to enable all of this in a modern world, you have the entire IT industry, which is called big tech, that is facilitating all of this, communication and more transportation and more remote. They're trying to reduce the distance just online, but we don't realize our food is doing longer distances, and so many are products and services. So finally, what I want to say is that it is actually just a whole system of the transfer of wealth. We need to understand this very clearly. What was in our capacity, in our spaces, and with having land and food and a local economy and cottage industry and products and services, what we could have done, it has been taken away from us and manipulated and controlled to an extent now that in this global pandemic, even though there are so many local uh, medicine systems, like in India, there are alternative treatments for what is called the COVID symptoms. Whether the treatment is the Ayush protocol for COVID, or the homeopathy protocol, or the NICE protocol, or integrative natural medicine that I used also for these COVID symptoms. Um, they are, there's only one, system that's been pushed, which is actually a business system, and it's these vaccines. And it's all these business people who think they have the power and the money to, like people like Bill Gates, who are declaring that they need to reduce the population through vaccine. And what is coming out right now with a lot of people knowing, fighting for their rights and knowing that this is harmful technology and refusing the vaccines, the latest news is out that they are trying to put all of this mRNA technology into our food supply chain. So once again, our food supply chain is in such danger, and it's only when that food supply chain is in the control of others and these big corporations that they can do things like that, which damage the human body and damage the DNA. So it's a high time now that we look at having our food supply chain in our own hands, because it is for our own good, and the business interests of others are only damaging our own lives and our way of living. That's what I wanted to share. It's become even more important right now in the world today for people to grow their own food locally, because they are able to maintain their health locally with traditional or natural medicine practices. And this the capacity to do this, and the decisions that to be taken have to be done now, uh, if we want to have a natural and healthy life, and if people really want to help people. Thank you.
Thank you, Darryl, for your insightful views on the topic. I will now direct my next question to Rahulji. What has been your observation and involvement in our food supply system?
Thanks, Sophie. And thank you, Darryl, for having me on your New Earth Summit program as a panelist on this extremely important subject of food. Well, I'll probably be able to answer your question, Sophie, in maybe in 4 or 5 minutes from now, when I give you a little bit of background, some of my thoughts on the topic, which is the contamination of the food supply chain. And I think really that quite a bit of the listeners, whether they are currently with us or they are listening to the recording of this later, the listeners' attention must really be drawn to the name of the topic. Why are we saying that there is a food supply chain which is contaminated? In the light of what Darryl described with the images and with his narration about the images, why do we even have such a thing as a food supply chain? And more fundamentally, is food a substance that naturally requires something called a supply chain? When post the Industrial Revolution, we associate the idea of supply chain with manufactured products. Well, part of the answer is that food, as Darryl mentioned, has ceased to be something living and natural, which comes out of an environment close to us that we tend, and has become a commodity. And once it becomes a commodity, then it's no longer in our control, it's no longer in our grasp, and is owned in all the forms that mechanical processes turn it into, is owned by corporations and their investors, of course. And that's the reason we have this quite hideous thing called a food supply chain, which is totally unnatural, but again, which exists, as Darryl pointed out, because we have things like cities into which we are all crammed. And those of us who decide not to be crammed, or those of us who would like not to be crammed but have to live in cities, have to endure cities because of reasons of job or career, we become the willing or unwilling consumers of the products of the food supply chain. So partly due to, I would say partly due to the reasons that he outlined, which is that over the last century, or maybe century and a quarter, the concentration of global capital has worked very hard at trying to ensure that the captive audience for such a thing as a food supply chain is really best done by cramming people into cities and towns. And the more you can cram them, and the more you can make the already large cities become even bigger into megapolises, then the more you have the control over what they eat and who produces what they eat. And this is something that we have seen from around the take shape really around the mid 19th century, coinciding with the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution, which then accelerated after the Second World War, and which in India we began to see around the 1960s, around the mid 1960s and thereafter. Still the pace wasn't anywhere near what was seen in Western Europe in the early part of the 20th century. But after, I would say, the late 1990s, that pace in India has accelerated a great deal. So to come back to your question, what was my involvement in food supply chain? Mercifully, very little, if in fact nothing at all, I would say. On the contrary, my work during the time that I was an advisor to a program which ran for 5 years, administered by the Indian Council for Agricultural Research, the ICAR, under the Ministry of Agriculture. My work was in fact quite the opposite. How do you identify traditional cultivation techniques and practices in India in the different states, and how do you bring them on a par with what is produced by our national agricultural research system, which is what this big network of crop laboratories is. Of course, that was the aim, or rather that was the stated aim. It never actually worked out because formal crop scientists, very similar to formal medical scientists, who I'm sure Darryl has had many run-ins with over the subject of what is actual medicine and what is actual disease. It's surprisingly the same when it comes to food and crops. So the formal crop sciences believe that they are the only knowledge holders and any other kind of knowledge is invalid. And they also believe that the laboratories that they use in order, for example, to experiment and create new hybrid seeds, that those are where crop life actually begins. So to my utter astonishment, I realized that here is a class of scientists in India who, within the space of, I would say, a generation, really within the space of a generation, have been completely, or rather have been caused to be completely divorced and cut away from everything that was traditionally known and attended to about crops in India, which rested on our knowledge systems. So that really meant only one thing, which is that the formal crop science of the West had established such a strong mechanism here that it was able to subvert some of our brightest minds to think along its lines and to abandon our lines of thought. And that's really what happened. I think it's exactly the same as we've seen with medicine. And of course, there are many other parallels. But where the food supply, I mean, before I quickly get into the different ideas of what we mean by contamination, just the food supply, you know, from the time that I was a teenager, which would be around the very early 80s, if you picked up, you were guaranteed to read in a daily newspaper in any given week that, oh, India is facing a food shortage very soon, within the next year or two, if we don't do X, Y, and Z. And of course, the X, Y, and Z was prescribed either by the crop scientists or by economists or by central planners. So there was always this Damoclean sword hanging over us that we are not going to have enough to eat and we are always going to be hungry. And this was a very clever psychological tactic that was used by these great big corporations, which Darryl spoke about, and their investors, keeping in mind the memories, the still preserved memories of famines that Indians have had right from the mid 19th century, and in fact until the Great Bengal famine of 1943, which had a lot to do with the Second World War and the removal of what was by rights our cereals, which was diverted for the use of the war troops. So yes, it was a psychological, very clever psychological appeal to, no, we never want to go through famine again, and no, we never want to go to face hunger again. So let's put all our faith in the crop scientists and the agronomists and all the investors behind them and do exactly what they say. Well, what did happen is, as of course you know, the Green Revolution was brought in. And I'll skip the gory details of what that did to our farming systems all over India, and we see the effects in Goa till today. In fact, even more so in places like Goa. I'll explain that in a minute. And the consequence of that Green Revolution experiment, which was, in fact, Darryl mentioned the Rockefeller Foundation. So it was the Rockefeller Foundation and the Ford Foundation working together with what became the American Aid Agency, which is today called USAID, and USDA, which was the United States Department of Agriculture, which pushed this very hard, very successfully, with the complete connivance of the political establishment in India at the time of the late 1950s, well into the mid 1970s. So the Green Revolution, in fact, completely subverted all the, well, not all, but the major knowledge systems that existed in the agricultural belts of the Punjab that was in India, Western UP, Gangetic UP, Eastern Gangetic, the entire Eastern Gangetic region, which is today Bihar, part of Jharkhand, extending into North and Mid Bengal, so that's West Bengal, plus all the adjacent tributaries of the Ganga and the Yamuna. So these were really the core areas of for where the Green Revolution so-called technologies were applied. What did happen is that within a generation, the knowledge systems that existed in those places, which had to do with rice and wheat cultivation, were totally removed from the scene, because here they were given seeds pushed by the respective state agriculture departments to say that forget about what you've been growing and what your forefathers have been growing. This is what you're going to grow, and we are going to give you all the incentives and subsidies so that it's going to make it economically worthwhile for you. And within a generation, the knowledge of how to grow the cereals that had existed until then in those parts was mostly banished. There may have been a few holdouts here and there in a few panchayat areas. And that lesson, unfortunately, sadly, was completely lost on India, even in the 1980s, when it became abundantly clear that the hybrid seeds brought in by these great gleaming foreign collaborations had in fact already reached a yield plateau. So you could do whatever you wanted. You could pump your fields with even more chemical fertilizer. You could pump your fields with even more pesticide, but they did not give any more yield, because yield was one of the key metrics that were used to justify the existence of this program called the Green Revolution, saying that if we don't produce enough, then Indians will go hungry. Well, that was complete rubbish. Indians never did go hungry for those reasons. And neither in fact did we have to rely only on certain amounts of wheat and rice in order to fill our bellies. That was another complete misconception. So this was the situation had there been a review of it in the 1980s. In the 1990s, which is around the period when I began to get interested in the ideas of traditional cultivation, especially. So I grew up in Bombay, and as you know, north of Bombay is also the Konkan. The Konkan extends quite a bit further up from Bombay. And north of Bombay, in what is today the Thane, or rather the Palghar district, is the home of a tribal community which is well known for its art, which is called the Varli. They're very well known for their art, which is very elemental in form. But they're also excellent. I mean, you have earth keepers. They're really fantastic forest keepers. I mean, every single thing that they need for their sustenance, for their medicine, for their rituals, for their creativity comes from the forest and everything around the forest. And they grow rice as well. Not the kind of rices that we are used to seeing in Goa and the nearby Konkan, but not very different either. And it was there around the late 80s or early 90s, probably around 1991, not later, that I began to see their approach to cultivation, which is really quite remarkable to recount, because they had, of course, nothing whatsoever to do with chemical fertilizer, nothing whatsoever to do with pesticides. They used to have small plots. They did not clear forests, of course, never. They used to have small plots in which they grew their rice. And around the perimeter of those plots, they grew 2 or 3 different kinds of either pulses or legumes, or what are called coarse cereals. So they could have been a kind of ragi or a kind of barley, whatever it was. And these were grown specifically to attract the creatures which would otherwise eat the rice. So their philosophy was that, look, we are growing the rice for us, but there are all sorts of creatures who are also going to be interested in the rice, but we know through our observation that they're interested in many other things as well. So if we grow those other things, they will eat those other things and leave our rice alone. And that's exactly what happened. And this was an extraordinary education, because I began to see that here was a philosophy of not only of growing, but of treating the other creatures that inhabit natural spaces in our environment, of treating them with not only respect, but a great deal of friendship. That, look, our species is able to grow things, you like to eat this, so we'll grow it for you. And please leave our rice alone while you're at it. So they did this without fanfare, without great academic papers, without the interference of the crop scientists, to whom such a thing had never occurred, and never did occur, in fact. But life rolled on, and the demands of the multinational corporations became stronger and more strident. And the whole big apparatus around the idea that we needed a food supply, and without that food supply being secure, and designed in a way that would bring great amounts of food to the masses in the cities, India would starve. That never went away from the entire planning paradigm of India. It never ever went away because it was milked for everything that it is worth. And I'll just give you an example of how I think deviant such an idea is. So in around 2009-10, which is just over a decade ago, which is around the time that I had already begun to work on the questions of food supply at a local level and what was happening at the national level. We had roughly these quantities: rice 90 million tons, wheat 80 million tons, coarse cereals, which is a terrible word. It actually means all the lovely cereals like jawar, bajra, ragi, 40 million tons, and pulses 15 million tons. So 90 rice, wheat 80, coarse cereals 40, pulses 15. Now for 2019-20, so that is the immediate year that has passed us, we have 115 million tons of rice, 105 million tons of wheat, 47 million tons of coarse cereals, and 23 million tons of pulses. So over a period of exactly 10 years, rice production has gone up from 90 to 115, which is a huge jump. I mean, I'm not getting into the question of whether this is a valid number or not. I mean, Darryl will need to give a different session for that. Big jump. Wheat goes up from 80 to 105, again more than 20 million tons. Coarse cereals, which is the cereal lifeline for a huge number of Indians, goes up from 40 to only 47. And even this I doubt very much. I mean, I completely doubt it because of having seen the way the statistics are prepared from the inside. And pulses goes up from 15 to 23 million tons. Again, very unlikely. I'd say it's barely 20. I would say coarse cereal is barely 45. So what then happens is that we see that completely contrary to maintaining crop diversity and thereby maintaining crop biodiversity, there is greater concentration on rice and wheat. And why has this happened? Why has this happened? Because of something that was critically connected to the food supply chain of India and is central to how contamination can occur. Rice and wheat are the bulk commodities of food in India. Anything that you want to do, Darryl mentioned towards the end of his presentation, what can be done with these horrible things that they've introduced into so-called vaccines, which are to put substances into them which create dependencies and create chemical dependencies. Well, I'm sorry to tell you and your viewers that this is exactly what has been happening for well over a decade, in fact, closer to 15 years, through a project called food fortification, whereby allegedly deficient minerals and substances, deficient in the sense that they are claimed to not exist in our diets, are introduced into cereals. And of course, since we have rice and wheat as the primary cereals, these are introduced into rice and wheat. And moreover, we have in India something called the public distribution system, which we know better as ration shops or fair price shops, which is where we buy these things from. And the bulk of the commodities that are available to citizens at the fair price shops, ration shops, are in fact rice and wheat, which are almost, I mean, I would say this very bluntly, almost all contaminated by substances which should never be in rice and wheat. And I'm not just talking about the pesticide, the residues, and I'm not just talking about the absorbed fractions of NPK, which is the synthetic fertilizers. We are talking about all sorts of other things which are given to, which make their way into our diets through PDS rice and PDS wheat. So my involvement in this completely distorted food supply chain has been to try and reduce the distortion, or make an attempt to call attention to the fact that it can be reduced in the first place and needs to be reduced, and it should never take the shape that it has taken shape in our lifetime. Through my work in with the Ministry of Agriculture, which I have no hesitation in telling you was a complete failure, and thereafter through my work with the Ministry of Environment, by doing it the other way, which is to encourage as much of traditional cultivation as possible. When we worked, especially in the Indian Himalayan region, which is all the states in which there are hill districts which are at the foothills of the Himalayas. So right from Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, and then the Eastern Himalaya, which is all the northeastern states, plus hilly Assam. Yeah, well, so that's a long-winded answer to your question, Sophie.
Thank you, Rahulji, for your valuable reflections on the state of our food supply. My next question is for both panelists. What are the first steps that people should take to secure food supply, healthy food supply?
So, yes, Sophie, I would like to reply to that first. And, you know, yeah, the first thing is to realize, where you're living and what are your options, right? How, if you're living in a city, then what really are your options? I'm sure people have understood about eating healthy, eating natural, organic food. And so they have been trying to get all of that since at least the last 3 to 5 years. So the first thing is, if you find yourself stuck in a city, then if you're going for fresh food to the big, bazaars, then they are all coming from out of state. They are all grown on soils that are, full of chemicals and all of these hybrid seeds. In our previous webinars, especially the one on heirloom seeds, that is what Rahul was talking about. That villagers were trying to conserve, but they got almost completely wiped out by these institutes that and researchers who brought on the green revolution. Um, Again, you have to understand those institutes. They were funded by these capitalists, because otherwise in nature in the village, who needs the institute or any body to tell people how to grow local food? I mean, when I used to come to Goa here for a vacation, right from the age of 8 years old, every summer vacation, my uncle in living in my father's brother in this house, he used to have a field. He used to grow food over there, and I used to go and help him in the field. I used to eat something right on the spot over there. So there was no big science to grow something local, seasonal, and in a healthy way. So, and people were doing it in a self-sufficient way. So this the topic about these, and we used to have those local heirloom seeds. Now, the important part about the local and heirloom seed is the seed that has been passed on from generation to generation in that locality. It has it has the complete DNA, and it knows what to do with regards to the soil, how to take the nutrients from the soil, how to, as it grows into a plant, how to fight off the pests naturally by taking certain minerals from the soil and creating its own medicine against the pests. And therefore, the plant remains healthy. And if the plant remains healthy, then pests can, it has got good mineralization and good immunity and good natural medicine, then the, even if the pests are there, they cannot attack and take down much of the crop. And it's only when you bring seeds from outside and try to sow in that soil, that those crops may fail because they do not know the DNA of the land and the environment. So it takes 1, 2, 3 generations for the plant to do that. So the thing is, even if you're in the city, you need to go and find out. In outskirts, there will be some small people who are selling vegetables. Go and find out if there are any people who have their own farms. And at least, one Sunday morning or whenever they are free, go and visit their place. Because many of the small vendors also, they buy from the big commercial people. So your only kind of hope is to find small farmers who are growing, on their own land. They of course call it county, but once you go there and you'll find out they put in urea, then of course that's not healthy. So in the city, you're either going to opt for eating organic produce that is there on the shelves, but again, that is already contributing to all the damages that I explained in in my presentation. Um, we have to evolve to that state now, at least, because it's already too late for the planet, and we have to understand that we should not be participating in such things. And so maybe then the option is, if you have no good choices in your city and you are making choices right from morning to evening that not only damage your health but they damage the planet as well, then you're contributing to this. So try and look for the options, like what I did 10 years back. Nobody gave it to me on a platter. You see, I was at the peak of my engineering, you know, field life when I left a good salary. And for the right reasons, I decided to come to my native village. And that's, I think, the safest or easiest place for anybody in a city to go to. We all know where our roots are. And so, without any plan, just with the idea, I came to Goa, and within 1 year, I made it. In fact, within 6 months itself, because I was treating people for health, right? So you have sick people all over the place because all of the malls also have come to the village. So I started in wellness, and then over a couple of years, I started in food and the organic market and all of that. And there are many things over here. If you get a group of people from your city who want to have a natural life in a more greener place, then get together, and now's the time to make the move, because our cities, as you can see, they're getting more and more toxic with also the 5G coming in, and the pollution and the stress and all these rules and regulations that are being imposed by these corporations or the globalists or the elites, um, into what they are creating, which is being called the Matrix, just as you saw it in the movie The Matrix. So yes, that's the first thing I would advise people to do, is look at what you are consuming from morning to night, and if you really don't like it, then choose a different life, choose to go to nature. And all of us, I mean, at least in India, every person knows about saving money, and people have got money saved for the next 10 years at least. Even if they've been working for 10, 15 years, they have enough money to live off it for the next 10 years without even working. So at least those people who have done it, and that's what you get in those cities and those multi-story buildings. You get good money for being in that toxic environment, serving all of these, toxic companies. So, well, use that money, take a break of 1 year. Don't think about earning. Just come to the village, put your heart into walking on, getting good food, getting good water, living in a natural home, contributing or reviving the cottage industry of your village, right? We just need at the village level people helping people. You do not need any government grants, and you do not need so many things. If you make a holistic community, even though organic is a little more expensive, if it turns out to be, if you do it at a small scale, uh, but at least people who understand the philosophy, and when you go there, you have to spread the education. So you create a community that is knowledgeable and support you, because they know this is good for their health and it's good for the future of this planet. A very important thing in such places is to spread the knowledge of what is local seeds, local foods, and seasonal foods. Because even people in the villages, because of all these shops and malls are getting them foods from across the world, which are not seasonal, local, and healthy, and making them sick. Uh, uh, because of the supply of the wrong food, uh, people are just eating. People have to eat food, right? So they're eating all of this rubbish, and then they have no place for the local food. So the local seed grower who was growing some of the millets, for example, they have stopped growing because the modern person is just eating the rice and the wheat, all the genetically modified and hybrid varieties of all of these grains, and filling up their tummies. So you need to go and create awareness in these places that in my book itself, Become Healthy or Extinct, I've given the clear reasons for why rice and wheat is unhealthy. They are grown in such quantities, higher quantities than are required for our consumption, because they are currency. Currency means it's very easy to cultivate them. It takes a little more work to grow and harvest, for example, millets, because you have small, insects around eating more of millets, and even birds. So, uh, it's easier to grow rice and wheat, and the weight is more, so it converts into like currency. So it's basically a money making system to grow more of rice and wheat. So we need to kind of get out of these unhealthy grains and go at least places like India back into millets, locally grown, organic. So the point I was making is very important to know what is local and teach it to others, so that more people start consuming these local vegetables, roots, seeds, pulses, millets, uh, because you have to create the demand first. Okay, then don't expect the poor farmer. You go and give him lectures and ask him to put the investment and grow it. And then when he grows the crop, you do not have enough people who have understood that these things are good, and all his produce is not bought at a good rate. So he is going to fail in one cycle itself. So this is what we need to do for our food security, for better health, for better water, for better natural living. Go back to the villages, and when you go first, you can have get involved in many businesses. So I have 2 3 business lines. That's why I make more money now than I used to do in my corporate life. Uh, and all of them are natural products connected with health or with food, or purification systems. Um, so yeah, that would be my immediate advice to people, to observe what they're consuming all through the day, and see where it's coming from, and whether it is natural, and what resources does it take the earth to give those things to you. In our eco village, for example, we are having the concept of using only natural things. And tomorrow I will present in the tree economy all of the natural things we can have from plants, and how life can be complete by that. Yes, Rahul, if you would like to, what are your ideas and advice to people, as a urgent thing they can do to for their food?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'd have to say that in around 2012 and 13, 2012 and 13, when we were, I was at the point of this program with the Ministry of Agriculture, which was already winding up. And what did happen, which was an effort that had started during the consultations for the 12th five-year plan. The 12th five-year plan ran from 2012 to 2017. That was, in fact, India's last formal five-year plan. What we did do as part of our as part of some of the conceptual experiments that I ran for the ICAR program, was how to diversify consumption of food away from this food supply chain, which was already becoming too difficult to deal with, especially at the local level. And what we did do was what was called at that time crop choice modeling, which is that how does any given population in an administrative area, whether you call it a district or a sub-district or taluka, tehsil, whatever it is, how does that population reduce the amount of raw crop, whether it's cereal or pulses or oilseeds or whatever it is, which it brings in from outside, and how does it replace it with what is grown inside? And this is fundamentally linked to, in fact, recirculating not only the money resources which you mentioned, which the more you recirculate local money, the stronger everybody is locally, but also recirculates knowledge resources within that area. And I'll give you an example of why this is important. We have under one of our ministries, which is called the Ministry of Statistics and Planning, we have what is called the National Sample Survey Organization. The NSSO runs very detailed surveys on a variety of important subjects. Of course, one of them is agriculture. And part of what it surveys for agriculture is indebtedness. So how much in debt are agricultural households? And the NSS data showed that around 2002, 2003, the number of agricultural households that was indebted, which was in debt to some degree or the other, and this is persistent debt, so they can't pay this debt back in a agricultural calendar year. So that carries over till the next year, was about 49%. A decade later, 10 years later, 2012, 2013, it hadn't come down, it had actually gone up to about 53, 54%. Now, what is important is that the 77th round of the NSS has concluded in 2019. The reports have started coming out. And about a month ago, they released the report for 2019-20. And what do you think the debt rate is? It's still above 50%. Of course, they've used statistical ways to try and bring it down. I'm sure that it is not less than 55%. This means 55% of our agricultural households, which produce the food that we eat, are in persistent debt. That means they are not able to break the seasonal chain of debt from one season to the other. And this is important because this is a direct result of being, in fact, chained to that supply chain, because that supply chain is not local. If it was local, it wouldn't be a supply chain, and they would be out of debt in a matter of 2 seasons. Any number of organizations all over India which has worked on agricultural economics has come to the same conclusions over and over again for well over 30 years, that the way to do it is to be able to include the non-growing, non-cultivating urban consumers into the circle of consumption and the support of the growing of cereals and foods which are local, relevant, and culturally suited to that region. That's really the way to grow. And Darryl had mentioned very briefly, he had mentioned something called smart cities, which has become a whole big program of the government of India, which I think is a terrible idea, which of course has its own reasons because of what we mentioned, that the more that you are able to cram people in together into cities, the more you can control them and therefore control behaviors and responses and so on. And one of the places in India which in fact took on this idea of what is a smart city about 4 years ago, and which produced an excellent book about it, is this one. It's about Auroville, and it says smart city of another kind. And what it did say in, it's a pretty hefty book. What it did say is that smartness is not what is given to us to assume. Smartness has to do with being able to live more sensibly with nature. And for example, where agriculture is concerned, it talks about creating fertility. And this is really important in those parts, because in that part of Tamil Nadu, there tend to be very dry patches, hard, stony soil, etc. And they were able to convert the topology completely in a matter of 30 to 35 years. So this was a living example, really, which we had, and there's so many which are available all over the Deccan, whether it's the upland Deccan, the big expanses of the Deccan that we see in eastern Maharashtra and North Karnataka, or the regions closer to us, which fall into semi-dry or semi-arid zones, where regeneration has been done by so many local groups. Now, there was a question about reading material. I'll give you a few which I have around me in my stacks of books here. This is one. I don't know whether this is still in print or not. Okay. This is called, wait a sec, Cultivating Diversity. This is by Vandana Shiva and Vanaja Ramprasad. Vanaja used to run an excellent NGO in Mysore. So you look for this one. If somebody still has a copy, please buy it. For those of you in Goa, I'm sure a lot of you are in Goa. Here's from the Other India Press. This is the Organic Farming Source Book. There were 2 editions. I think this is the first one. I have the second one somewhere around. This is an excellent guidebook for anybody who's interested in the whole manner cycle and the whole philosophy of organic farming, with hundreds of examples of who does what wherever you are.
So Rahul, this
Coming
book you said is available at the Other India bookstore in Mapsa, right?
I hope it is. I think this is the first edition. I have no idea whether they run out or whether they still have. If they still have it, just go and buy whatever you can.
Right.
Maybe we can convince Claude to run a reprint or bring out a 3rd edition. Coming back to cities do have communities which are very interested in growing what they eat and growing it the way they want to. So this is from Bangalore, where we spent quite a few years there. Vishwanath, this is B.N. Vishwanath. Vishwanath is really quite an institution there. And in the area of Bangalore called, where was it, Sheshadri Puram, and those areas, he has a huge following of people who have really, literally 150 square foot terraces where they're growing all kinds of things. And he put this book together as to what you can grow by yourself in your small terrace or even in your balcony in a city. So these are the kind of books to look out for. There are a number of small organizations all over India. This is one in Madras, in Chennai, called the C.P. Ramaswamy Foundation. And they bring out a series called the Ecological Traditions. So this is Ecological Traditions of Andhra Pradesh. Okay. And similarly, they have one for Tamil Nadu. And these are available with them. they have this series is for several states. I don't know whether Goa is there, but if you go to their website, if you look for the CP Ramaswamy Foundation in Chennai, you'll certainly find them. So with the ecological traditions comes the whole, again, the philosophy of being able to cultivate what is locally, culturally relevant and suited to local diets as well. More about the importance of genetic material that is culturally based and culturally rooted comes in books such as this one. And if you're looking for the links between food and medicine, you look for books like this. This is Ranade and Frawley, Ayurveda, Nature's Medicine, published by, this is Motilal Banarsi Das, once again an older title. So this is Ayurveda, Nature's Medicine by David Frawley, Subhash Ranade. There are also, all sorts of, if you are willing to look, there are small pamphlets from the era of the 90s, which explain some of these concepts that we've been talking about, and perhaps which you've dealt with in some of your earlier sessions, in greater detail with a lot of explanation. Where these are available today, I really couldn't say, because I've been collecting them for years and I have them sitting on various shelves here and there. But there's a lot of reading material online. I don't think all of it is digitized. We didn't do that those days. But if you look, I'm sure you'll find it. And I think as you said, what needs to be done now is to dissociate and disconnect ourselves from this very toxic food supply chain, which is by default contaminated, and to be able to identify who it is who has plots of land in and around even small towns, let alone villages, where we can bring these ideas, say that these are our local vegetables, these are our local cereals, and create, as you said, create that seasonal demand which makes it worthwhile. Making it worthwhile is really of fundamental importance. In, wait a minute, I'm just looking for those numbers. Yeah, 2018-19. So this is the Government of India's own data. 2018-19 monthly income for a agricultural household from its crop activities, that means from what the receipts from what it grows, and if it has a couple of cows and it's selling the milk, etc., receipts from those, 4,100 rupees a month. From wages, that means they went out to work as labor, 4,600 rupees a month. Now, this was a watershed that was completely unnoticed by our great economists and, of course, our eminent crop scientists. This is the first time ever that wage labor of an agricultural household has exceeded the receipts from its agricultural work. And to me, this is a very, very serious signal of what is going wrong entirely with the economics that is surrounding the food supply of India and where it is reaching and at what cost. So we need to completely reverse this foolish economics and bring it back to village level, to human scale level. Okay, I'll stop there, Rahul. Thanks.
Thank you, Rahulji. Our next question is from the audience, from Rashmi. How do we free India from British rule and evil billionaires forever?
So yes, we have to see, what the billionaires, are living off. I mean, even the ones in India, okay, who have signed up for this global plan, and they are, having meetings and handshakes with all of these global people capitalists who have made these models and these cities and these structures which are all controlling, uh, and forcing us to be uh, consumers. So that's the key word, right? What are you consuming every day, and from where does it come? And if it comes from a village, if it comes from the local place, if it's a natural product, then you are going to be supporting local farmers. And yeah, it's difficult if you are sitting, you're living in a city. Now, of course, there are organic markets also have started in different cities where you will get wooden toothbrushes, where you will get natural body soaps and all of that. And but still, again, some of them may come from huge companies that are again part of, it's just a wing of these big organizations. So, what is most important is now that we have understood that our cities are the contaminated places, we have to understand that we have to, first of all, go back to a place that is free, that is, got free economy and it has got health over there. So, again, the reply is to go back to your natural villages, start setting up, these small industries of goods, products, and services. Just keeping in your mind what are the things that I need, on a day-to-day basis, and what is the natural versions of those. Out of the coconut product, of the coconut tree, there are about 120 products that are manufactured, and out of the bamboo, there are about 65 products that are manufactured, which are of regular use. So I will talk about those things tomorrow, not just these two trees, but many other things about plants. So this is where we have to innovate, and it is the right of people getting together, going to a countryside and doing something by the people, for the people, in an organic, natural way. There can never be any law against it. It is just that you have to get together and you have to go and do that. So you have to create your own products and services when the system is only giving you contaminated products and services. Now, one more reason that I'm going to give you to get out of these cities is because these cities are where all the toxicities are at the highest, which are creating these COVID symptoms. So it is very clear now that this 5G is very directly connected to this inflammation that is caused within the body, which is creating COVID symptoms. And if you go to the website of Awaken India Movement, which is awakenindiamovement.com, go to their document section and you can download a document called The Truth of the Scamdemic. Over there, you will see the 8, 10, 12 different toxicities that have been introduced into our lives, right from GMO seeds to the various products that we take in through our EMFs and all of that, that are creating inflammation, bringing down the immunity of the human body, and slowly killing us and making us prone to these environmental changes and all of these synthetic food products and all. So those are the list of things that you should avoid, and those are the things that you are getting in the cities. So please go and think of how you can get or make alternative versions of all of those things. And that's so you need a clean slate with a clean set of people with the assets on the land. So understand what is asset-based community development and start doing it in your villages. So it's the and the other that another fact, there is no pandemic in the forest, in the jungles, right from where the so-called virus is supposed to come out, where there are trillions of viruses and whatever mutation or they're doing all the time. There is no pandemic over there. So that's another key for you to go to a natural place where viruses are, the natural part of life. They exist naturally, as is explained in that scamdemic document, as a byproduct of healing. They do no damage to the human body. They are part of our microbiome also. But these cities and all the toxicities designed in them are what are causing all these sicknesses right now in the world. And again, the capitalists have taken advantage of it and giving us system to address it, which everybody knows in the world now. Vaccine is not going to prevent you from getting COVID. It's not going to prevent you from transmitting COVID, and neither are you going to, survive if if the COVID symptoms are going to kill you. So this is what's happening in the cities. Uh, uh, there are problems being created, and the proposed solution also doesn't work. So we have enough innovation and enough ideas to go and do it ourselves. So, now is the time for it. And I also saw another question, should technology be banned in an eco village? No, the idea is not to ban this technology. There is good technology, there's organic technology, there's organic natural science. And this has been our endeavor at the Eco Village in Goa when designing it, is that how can I have all the things that I need in my daily life in a natural way. So when you think innovatively, you can get so many things without the need of even any electricity or any internet. So that is the way to go. So think innovatively, creatively for the things that you want in life for your daily use. When you're in an organic space, uh, right? Because there are much lesser things than you need in this natural space as compared to what you need in the city, where you're cut off from everything and everything has to be spoon fed. So that's the direction we are in. Um, uh, we will still use certain things that are necessary, but the way I've designed this particular eco village, where there are mostly earth keepers, it can run completely without electricity, without internet, and have a more beautiful, healthy, creative life. So yeah, think in that direction and start working towards it.
Thank you, Darryl. Our next question is from Vishwasha. In your views, who are the anti-evil billionaires?
Okay, now I'm wondering whether that was put across because anti who are the people, or who are the billionaires, who are the good billionaires, who are against the bad guys? I mean, again, just look very simple. It is just to follow, let me say, instead of follow the money, you follow the resources and the nature of the resources. So everything that is coming to you without causing any destruction to the planet is being supplied by the good guys. Okay, which is not causing you a health problem or an imbalance in the ecological balance of nature, or causing the usage of non-renewable resources that is coming from the good guys. So just follow that.
Rahulji, would you like to add to that?
Well, probably not, because then it'll go on for another hour. But just to, well, since you asked me, I can't refuse you. There are lots of bad guys who aren't billionaires, by the way. Lots. Some of them you'll find in state assemblies, some of them you'll find in parliament, some of them you'll find in who are working as secretaries, under secretaries, deputy secretaries, in short, bureaucrats. So I think what we've been able to see very much more clearly in the last since the first quarter of 2020 is that the billionaire bad guys rely on a lot of these people to get their work done in order to grab the resources, commodify them, and sell them back to us. I think that's what happens there.
Yes, I agree with you, Rahul. Yeah, many of these guys in our state machinery, it appears they are, even though they are well off, they consider themselves in the have-nots. So they are the ones taking all the bribes to push capitalist projects on different states in the country, and that's the only way they learn to make money. Now, the thing is that, if people create products, goods and services by the people, for the people, right? This is what the earlier idea was. We were self-sufficient people and we elected our representatives just to do the management of this flow, because out of creating this, there were certain central resources that we needed, which were roads, electricity, water, okay, and certain few industries. And because of that, we elected them and put them in place. But they took care to see that they did not support our local initiatives and our local industries and allowed it to fail. So our amount of goods and products and services started depleting. Because if we did all our work and money circulated within us, they had nothing to gain from it other than their salaries. So they had a vested interest in allowing things to fail. And then the capitalists came in with all of their agendas and their models and started giving these people money under the table. And that's how they got more money. So unfortunately, not only in India, this is all across the world. The capitalists are hand in glove with the so many corrupt politicians. And that's the way the system runs. So, so it has to be in my view, it has to be a people's movement who are creating local products, goods and services, and we become self-sufficient on our own. And then there is no deficiency in the state, and we do not have the need of getting these capitalists and all of their industries, controlling industries. So we have to, at our own city and state level, we have to question each of the policies that are being proposed in the state, whether they are good for the state and the health of the people and the health of the state. So the only way you can do is by getting knowledgeable people together, forming committees. This is what I spoke about earlier also twice on the summit. Please form committees of knowledgeable people who have the knowledge, have done the projects and know the science, and get them together to make a campaign for good policy and good projects in the state. That is the way we can save ourselves.
Thank you, Darryl. I think we've run out of questions, so we'll wrap this up. So we finally come to the end of today's session. A big thank you to the panelists, and thanks to the audience as well for being with us today. We hope you've found this information useful, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at the same time on the same link for our Day 18 topic, Multiple Dimensions of a Tree Economy. Namaste and have a great evening.